One, there we go. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Vagabond Dog Industry Chats. This week, we've got a good friend of mine, Kim Gibson from Ontario Creates. She's a program consultant on the interactive digital media branch, which means more than just games, but for me, it's always interactive digital media is games in my world. But perhaps you can clarify that a little bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a super big part, games. It's probably the biggest part, and it's part I focus on. So yay.
Let's see. How do we summarize Ontario Creates and the IDM program that runs there?
So Ontario, I'll give you
sort of. You do it. I'll butcher.
I'll explain it to you. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
This is I'm going to take over, and you're just going to sit there and do
Perfect.
nothing.
Easiest show I've ever done.
Ontario Creates is a government agency. So we are an agency of the Ministry of Tourism, Heritage, Sports, and Culture Industries. That's the ministry that we report into. So we're actually a government agency. All of our funding is government-based funding. And what we do is we support what we would call the I guess the best way to describe them is we call them the culture industries or the entertainment industries. So Ontario Creates deals with more than just the interactive sector. So interactive is one of the sectors that we deal with, but we also deal with film and television production, book and magazine publishing, and the music industry. And then the interactive digital media industry is the part that I deal with specifically. And then within the interactive digital media industry, my focus, or what I do most of the time, is I work with game studios. So that's the bulk of what I do. And within the agency, my area of focus is on the program side of things. So the agency does lots of different things. We have tax credits here in the province that are another, we're going to get a cat visit. Oops, keep on. Pick a direction. We get tax credits. We have tax credits. And we operate the media tax credits in the province. We have a research branch, and we also house the Film Commission. And then the other thing we do, the part that I work on, is the program side, where we provide direct funding to the industries and direct funding into the companies that we support. So I have counterparts who do the same thing I do for film and for books and music, but my area of focus is games.
Right. So, looking at the umbrella of things that Ontario Creates supports, from film, games, books, TV, these are all, in the cultural sector, but they're also like consumable arts, right? It's a very can you talk a bit about the difference and the purpose of the difference between those categories that Ontario Creates supports versus interpretive dance and painters and more what one would traditionally think of as arts versus consumable arts?
Yeah, so our mandate as a government agency, we deal with creative industries, with the media industries. Our mandate as an organization is to support economic development. So ultimately what we're looking to do is to grow the sectors that we serve. And of course, there's transactions that happen. People and performers get paid and artists get paid. But what we've sort of exclusively dealing with the media industries, and our mandate, we like to support projects, and generally you need a great project before you're able to grow a company. Our mandate as an entity is to grow companies, to create benefit in the province of Ontario. So it's one of the things that I like to highlight when I'm doing an information session or talking to somebody about our funds. And I think it's a really key takeaway that applies not just to Ontario Creates, but to any other funder, whether that's like a game publisher or another funding agency. Anybody that you're pitching a project to, and with the intent of trying to raise financing, is you have to understand their objectives. So our objectives as an agency is to create economic benefit in the province of Ontario. And we do that by sort of on the small basic level, kind of funding great projects. And then by funding awesome, creative, and amazing projects, we will then drive growth within amazing companies. And then at sort of an even bigger sort of macro level, by growing those projects that feeds the growth of those companies, we're growing the entire province. We're creating a positive economic environment in the region of Ontario. So that's ultimately what we do. So, and that's not to say that there isn't, again, transactions that happen with other types of art and cultural content, but we deal specifically with the mediated culture.
Right. So I mean, like, as anybody in the audience who's starting out in their game design or game development career, a lot of us are independent, completely independent. It's very easy to understand why personally growth for the company is a great thing, but it can be a little less clear why that growth, how is that growth beneficial to a province?
Yeah, I mean, what we're looking to do is to provide, ultimately, and one of our big measures is employment. So what we look at and how we measure the success of the projects that we funded, and also the success of our programs, because much like your project, you have certain milestones that you need to hit and commitments to us. We have commitments to our funders, to the broader government. And what we're looking to do and how we measure our success is looking at those employment numbers. So how many jobs were created as a result of us funding X project? Ultimately, what we want to see down the road is also that projects are sort of commercially successful. So, your budget is $500,000. We give you $500,000, or 50% of $500,000. I'm assuming we'll get there to a bit more of the nuts and bolts. But we give you a contribution, and your output, your revenue, is basically $501,000. We would consider that a success. I mean, a really small success, but that's a success. We want to see projects that are commercially successful as well. But our key measurables and what we report in on is the jobs created. So that's the economic part of it. And that's because we are funded by government. So government wants to see those results. We don't fund games or films or music just because they're creatively good. We fund them because they're creatively good, and again, grows companies because they're great and awesome and they do well in the market. And then it grows the ecosystem and creates employment opportunities for Ontarians.
Right. And there are agencies in the province or country that do just for the cultural, just purely without any of the economic factoring, but they run on very different principles and very different guidelines, I presume.
Exactly. And that's why understanding objectives is really important, because a pitch that you would send in, regardless of the industry, a pitch that you would send into Ontario Creates would be very different than a pitch that you would send into the Arts Council. So we're looking for different things. So understanding the objectives of what the person you're pitching to is looking for. Likewise, a pitch to a publisher would be different than it would be to an Arts Council or to Ontario Creates. Although I would say that a pitch to a publisher would probably be more in line with what we're looking at supporting, because ultimately they want to make money too.
Yes, that's almost entirely their goal.
Yeah.
There are key differences between obtaining funding from an organization like Ontario Creates versus a publisher in intellectual property ownership, recoup, all kinds of aspects. Can you talk about what are the benefits to developers in Ontario who are seeking funding to aim their sights at Ontario Creates?
I'd say we're the best possible, and I say that I'm not boasting, but we are the best possible partner that you can have, because basically the funding that we're giving you, it is non-recoupable. We see it as an investment. We are making an investment in your project and in your company, but we don't expect you to pay that back. So there's no recoupment. It's not a loan. So we give you the money. You don't need to pay it back to us. I want to be very clear, though. It's not money with no strings attached. We expect you to meet your obligations and your targets that we work and we establish together. So we'll have targets around when you're going to finish, what the project will look like, how many jobs you'll create, how much money you'll spend in the province. So we expect you to meet those objectives. But if you do, the money is yours. We're ultimately also aligned in that we're looking at funding you for the same reason that you want to make your game, because you want to be successful. So our objectives are entirely sort of aligned. Did I miss it? You talked about recoupment. What was the other thing you talked about? Oh, IP.
Oh, IP.
We don't take ownership of IP. It means nothing. It means nothing to us. We want you to keep the IP. We want you to keep the IP. We want you to keep the money in your company, because by keeping the money in your company and keeping your IP, you're in a better position to be able to excel as an organization, as a company. We want to see your success. That's what we're all about, is funding your success.
Right. So, I mean, with no recoup, no repayment on loan or anything. I mean, you talk about some strings, but those don't sound like those are like the bare minimum strings that any funder would demand. I mean, when I talk to my international development friends, they roll their eyes and they say, "Oh, of course, Canada free money," and it's, I mean. How do you respond to that term?
I don't know if it's free money, but it kind of is free money. I don't want to sort of be the word to get out that, hey, come to Ontario, free cash, because it's not really the way that it works. We are extremely lucky. So I don't think there are other regions in the province that are, or sorry, in the world that have what Ontario as a province has. We really do have a very, very, sorry, this is cat number 2 visiting. Move along. We really do have, I have 3 cats and a dog, so they may all make appearances. Don't put your tail in my face. We do, and we are extremely lucky, and I think, what you're hearing from your friends is exactly that. But it is fair to say that the funding is not readily available, in that we're not kind of doling it out like this.
Right.
You have to jump through some hoops. So it's not a string, it's a hoop, I guess. You have to submit an application. So, and it's competitive. Not everybody who applies gets the money. So there are lots of people on the outside looking in. We do only fund the best of the best, because that's all we have money for. So it's a lot of money, but it's not enough to give everybody a piece of the pie. So the pie is only so big, and the best people get a slice of it.
Right. Well, we'll talk about why the pie is not infinite in a minute, but first I want to talk a bit about those hoops. Now, you said the application process very nonchalantly, like it's 2 pages, 3 pages, and I'm very aware that it is not.
No, it's not. It's definitely not.
Yeah.
You want me to give you some insight into that?
Yes. Let's go.
Okay.
So, how deep does the rabbit hole go?
It is pretty, I don't want to say onerous, because I actually don't think there's much that we're asking you for. There are a few things that we're asking you for that just are relevant to our fund, but there's not everything that we ask you for is stuff that you just write for the fund and then toss in the garbage. It's stuff you can keep. But I would say, on average, it takes about a week of full-time work to put together what we call a concept definition application, which is an application for support for prototyping. And it takes about 2 weeks to put together a production application, which is an application for what we would consider a market-ready project. So it does take time, but a lot of the pieces we're asking you for are legit pieces that, if you're really serious about moving forward with your project, you would do anyways. Like, if you're going into production on a project, you'd be a fool not to do a business and marketing plan. You're going to have pitch the truth is revealed. You're going to need to have a pitch documentation. If you're pitching a publisher and you want to move forward, you'll have a budget, you'll have a schedule. So those are sort of things that are matter of course that a lot of people, of course there are some exceptions,
right?
A lot of people will do if they're quite serious about it. But it does take about 2 weeks of sort of concerted time to put those documents together. And that is kind of if you're starting from scratch. Now, most people hopefully most people don't say, oh, the deadline is on August the 10th. Oh, I'm going to start 1 week in advance. Usually people will start and do like a little bit sort of here and there over a couple of weeks. So they might sort of, it takes a week of full-time work to do it, but they might spread it out over a month to do a concept definition application. But yeah, it is work. You have to hustle for it. And one of the interesting things about applications is we kind of set a minimum bar in that we ask you to deliver what we need to see to make a decision. But sometimes we're not responsible for what the maximum bar is, because some people may put a whole bunch of extra effort into an application. And so the quality bar is much higher, whereas other people may not put as much effort into their application, and it shows. And so then it reflects their likelihood of getting funding. And one of the things that I find is rather interesting is because it is competitive and people have been turned down for support before. So they know, and they do hustle, and they do put in a really super strong application. And one of the things that's really interesting is if you're coming into us for production, we do not require that you have a prototype. But it is very rare that people will submit an application without that prototype being there. They come in with it because they know that it's their best chance to be successful. So the application process is a process. It takes time. It's competitive. Not everybody gets funding. And the people who hustle and work really hard at it are going to be in the best position to get support and funding.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that like most of your applications come with prototypes, simply because like if you launch a Kickstarter now without a prototype, if you announce a project without some sort of limited time demo, or if you hit a publisher without a prototype, unless you're literally Hideo Kojima, it's going to be pretty hard for somebody to greenlight a project without having a taste of it right up front.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So, I mean, you say most companies have a lot of these documents in order, before they go into the application process. Let's say you are an indie developer getting started. You spend all of your time focusing on game creation, pay very little attention to the business of it.
Oh, who are you describing?
Nobody in particular. But let's say somebody who's also just starting their career.
Okay.
What are the things that are most important in order to making sure that they're going to have an easy time creating these funding applications?
So the really interesting thing, I would say, one, being prepared and starting well in advance, reaching out and asking for help where you need help, because I am one of several people on a team. My other teammates work on non-gaming projects, but regardless of the industry that you're dealing with, we are always here to help. And I would say one of the things that we want to do is we want you to come in with a successful application. That's our goal. So when somebody calls me and says, I'm applying, I'll go through the process with them of vetting their eligibility. And then once they're eligible, or once we've determined that they're eligible, I give them an opportunity to ask any question they want. And there are stupid questions, let's be real, but I'll answer them. It's true, there are dumb questions. I just said that to somebody recently. But there are stupid questions, but I will still answer stupid questions. I will answer all of the questions that come in and provide sort of project-specific and application-specific advice where it makes sense. So I'd say to make it easier for yourself, start early and ask questions and engage with the people who will be accepting your application, because that's ultimately what we're here for. The other thing I'm just going to point out, because it comes up all the time, the things that developers are the most afraid of, or people who are new to the process are most afraid of, is the budget. People get so freaked out about the budget. They're like, oh my God, I don't know how to fill out this like 6-tab document. Oh, I'm so worried. And the one thing I'll say about the budget is you need to do it correctly. Don't get me wrong. Like, it has to be done correctly. It has to be reasonable. But the reality is that in most cases, it's not the budget that's going to determine whether you get the funding or don't get the funding. So people tend to misdirect their focus on that budget. There are other documents that, as a reviewer, for me, I weigh way more heavily. And you can see it reflected in our evaluation rubric, because we have a scoring system. Like there's a way that we score applications. And the things that are more important are your project description, your business and marketing plan, your company bio. Those are the things that are going to have more weight than the budget does. But people tend to get themselves all worked up in the budget. Maybe it's because it's an Excel document. I guess people don't like spreadsheets.
Well,
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, speaking as somebody who's very poor foresight, it can be a little daunting to like chart out, the financial plan for your game, ahead of time, especially if you're going into a year or 2 year project, right? It's very, it's one of those things where building up a plan and creating even a pitch document that is supposed to be followed to some letter, can be kind of frightening when games evolve and change so much over the process. You go in thinking one thing is a good idea, and then halfway through you realize, oh man, no, this is actually where the fun of the game is, and I need to build all this around that. And so
it's tough.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest challenge we face one of the biggest challenges we face in the program as administrators of the program. Because you brought up one factor, and that is that the game may change. But there are other things that change that are beyond your control as well. Like you have some control over the game that you're making, but you have no control over industry tastes and what players want to see. And that changes as well as platforms shift, as like things change. And so, yes, as a partner, we tend to work with developers because ultimately what we want is your best success. And if something radical changes in the industry, we're not going to force you down a path that doesn't make sense. We do review and do go through the process of accepting changes. And, sometimes, I say sometimes, but most of the time developers need extensions. So those things happen, and we do, and we are flexible. I would say one of the things about budgets that most people forget about, and it's my view of a budget and a schedule also, is and your project presentation. I mean, an application is a living and breathing document. It is going to shift. It is going to change. So the only thing you can do as a developer is put forward the best case based on what you know now. You don't have a crystal ball. We don't expect you to have that crystal ball. We just want to see that you've done some due diligence to kind of at least give consideration. So you might not know what the next major trend in gaming is going to be. We don't expect you to do that, but we want to see some evidence that you've at least given it some consideration.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on the topic of budgets, what are the markers of something that is clearly a poorly thought out budget? How do you know if you have a poorly thought out budget?
I mean, I look at budgets from different perspectives. I look at the game that's proposed, and I look at it kind of at a macro level. Like, does this look like they have enough budget and enough money here to do what they want to do? So that's one way to look at it. The other thing I do is I'll often sort of look at the nitty gritty and sort of the, how much of a developer's time do they have? How much of the budget, what percentage of the budget is dedicated to art? Have they covered off sound? That's a big thing that gets missed in budgets. Do they have an allocation for testing? Is there contingency? So looking more granularly at the budget. So there's two ways to kind of look at it, and I generally do both. The other thing to keep in mind is that budgets and projects are also highly variable in that you can have the question is kind of how long is a piece of string? Like you could say, I'm going to make a game with this many levels with like this style of gameplay. I have $200,000 to do it. It's like, yeah, I think you could do it, but you might be able to propose exactly the same sort of broadly outlined game, but have $1 million to do it. I mean, those are two completely different games, but the budgets can be valid depending on what the quality level is you're going for. So it's tough. Budgets are, again, and that's why they're living and breathing documents.
Now, we talked a bit about there's only so much of the pie, And
Yeah.
I'm curious, where is this pie coming from?
Well, the pie actually comes from government. So
Okay.
Ontario Creates is fully funded by the provincial government. So we get our budget through the government to run the different programs and our operational costs. Um, and also for operational costs to cover staff to administer the tax credits. The tax credits are separate. They don't come out of our budget. It's like a separate dispensation, but the funding all comes from government. So our master, so to speak, is the Ontario government, and that's who we report into. So we report into the Ministry of Heritage, Tourism, Culture, and anyways, I've said
Sports.
that all wrong. But whatever. No, not sports anymore. Oh my gosh, I get so confused. Anyways, we are, because the name changes all the time. We are not part. Um, we represent industry, but our focus and our funding all comes from government, and we report into that ministry. They oversee us, and which is really interesting because you'll note that although we have an economic development mandate, we don't report into the economic development ministry with the government, but we are still economic development. We are still focused on economic development.
Okay, I think I'm following. Um, I've seen the case brought up in the States before to raise programs like these, and detractors always bring up, well, we shouldn't be using tax dollars to make video games. They should be doing this, that, or the other. Is there a sound retort to this notion?
My retort would probably be to look at the results that we have. Like, we are not without ammunition to be able to show that we have created jobs, and you yourself probably see this as well, that the industry has grown.
Yeah.
Ontario developers, actually Canadian developers, but I think even within Canada, the Ontario development community has a lot more recognition. There are publishers now, and it's very interesting because I've seen the industry kind of move back and forth in the number of years that I've been doing it, from sort of everybody wanting to self-publish, and now everybody's like, oh wait, maybe I want a publisher. So now that the publisher, kind of working with a publisher, is more in vogue right now, we've had a lot of publishers reach out to us and say, hey, want to find out what's going on in Ontario. So we are seeing results and seeing impact and seeing job growth across the industry. So I would say there's success. Again, our metrics are economic, and that's one of, I think, the reasons why Ontario Creates as an organization is in a really strong position, regardless of which government we are serving. We are able to show results, and we don't fund product just for the sake of funding product. And I think some people who maybe detract from that or have things to sort of say, and you shouldn't be funding these products, I kind of think funding the products is a bit of a side benefit of basically growing an industry, and growing an industry where there are high paying, smart green jobs. Like, these are great jobs for people to have.
Right. So, I mean, you talk about the industry's growth over the last 5 years. It's grown a lot. Possibly, some might argue, too much. We had a conversation, maybe not us. Like 4 months ago, I had two guests on, Stephen and Stephen from Canadian Game Devs, and one of the questions that came up was, has the stimulation of the industry grown it to a scale where hi kitty,
There comes the black cat. Okay, move on.
It's now pretty hard as an indie dev bringing a project into Steam, into there is no other market. It's on PC.
Yeah.
What are the are there unintended consequences of continually growing the industry?
I think you could say there are, and I think we're in a tough position. Like, I think discoverability in the game space is probably the biggest challenge that we are facing. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's a lot of content out there. That being said, the growth in Ontario is my focus. So if I want to say I don't care what happens in other regions, but I
Right.
don't. And the best thing about the funds that we have, and I think there is, it is possible that we're ripe for a correction, because the reality is that companies, some companies won't be able to sustain themselves if they can't sell X units of a game at X dollars. It's when does it start? When does the math start being unfavorable? So the nice thing about being in Ontario is I feel like we are in a position to play a key role during what might be a really difficult adjustment in the sector, because the development companies here still have the opportunity to take risks,
Right.
and take chances and to develop new product and get it out into the market, and hopefully to find an audience. I mean, it's never our intent when we fund projects. It's never our intent to fund projects that aren't going to generate revenue. But the reality is, it's really, really challenging. It's really tough out there to do that. Lots of companies are successful, and lots of companies aren't. I mean, it is, and it always has been a hit-driven industry, and I don't think that's going to change. But I do think there's a lot of content out there right now, and honestly, my advice, I would say, less so for people who are moving, who have some industry experience and want to kind of get into development and start their own studio. If you've got some experience and a track record under your belt, and you feel confident and comfortable, and you've got, you're sustainable and you're able to sustain yourself, I'd say, yeah, go for it, give it a try. I feel like developers who are recent entrants to the industry, like new students and stuff, if you've got a great idea, do it. But I think you can also learn a lot by working for another studio, and get some industry sort of insight and experience, and because school is great, but believe me, I'm surprised every day at how much I learn, and I've been out of school for like 25 years and I am still learning new things, so, and getting better at my job every single day. But before you take that risk and make a chance, maybe you want to learn some things, kind of getting your feet wet in working for another studio before you jump in and do your own thing.
Right. I mean, because it is very appealing right now. I mean, especially with funding opportunities available to just go and be a completely independent and start your own studio, right out the gates. Um,
Yeah.
what, you know, what are the things that companies are in Ontario are doing to compete with that attraction? If there's truly top talent, right? Um, generally comes with a sense of independence or strength of mind, that would want to do things their own way. If these opportunities are available on an equal footing, um, why would somebody who is coming out of school, who has a fun idea, and is truly top talent, not go and make their own studio, especially if these opportunities are there? And it's are we how do we grow the employment, as opposed to growing an infinite number of sole proprietors or
Yeah,
sole
fair
business?
enough. And those are really good questions. So the interesting thing about the Interactive Digital Media Fund, and what we've talked about exclusively, I just want to be really clear about one
Yeah.
thing. What we've talked about exclusively in the Interactive Digital Media Fund to date, or to this point, is really just the product fund. So prototyping and concept definition. We have a whole bunch of other things that we do in the Interactive Digital
Mhm.
Media Fund too. But in the product side of things, and we're about to talk about one of those other things, on the product side of things, where we fund prototyping and actual production, those two streams require industry experience. So we don't actually accept new companies that are not led by individuals with a minimum of 3 years of industry experience into the program. So a recent graduate from an educational institution wouldn't be eligible for that particular stream.
Gotcha.
What we so and the other thing to keep in mind is these are really tough and competitive programs, and they've become more and more competitive. So even meeting the bare minimum requirement can be a challenge, because we are turning down companies that have already demonstrated their ability to deliver and to commercialize a product. So as a student coming out of a new, entering the industry brand new, you don't have that track record. So your ability to compete is low. What we have done, and this is the program I'm going to bring up, is we've brought a new program in place. And this doesn't completely answer your question, but it does help to kind of, one, give those people who have an awesome idea and are top talent an opportunity to maybe be able to get into the program. But it's an application-based program. So we will go through the process of vetting to make sure you are top talent, vetting to make sure that you do have a great idea. And what that program is it's a series of workshops that companies have the opportunity to participate in. At the end of the workshop, they can apply for a small grant of about $15,000 to help them move their project forward. And then when they're completed with the conclusion of that program, we consider them eligible for the Interactive Digital Media Fund. So we did see that there was a gap, i.e. people graduating from educational institutions that maybe had great ideas, but didn't necessarily meet the requirements for the IDM fund. So we wanted to give them an opportunity to kind of come into the program. One of the things that I will say about that program is that it's not something that we offer directly. So we partner with other organizations who deliver it on our behalf. And those organizations this time around are Interactive Ontario, which is a trade association in Ontario, the Hand-Eye Society, which hopefully some of your viewers are aware of. They're a fantastic organization, more of sort of an art service organization. And then we also, because I mentioned that the interactive digital media industry is more than just games, we also fund web series. We work with Women in Film and Television Toronto, and they run the program. So there's 3 sort of cohorts that are operated, and within each of those programs, people need to apply to participate. They are specifically and selected and hand selected to participate, and it's limited at 6 per year in each of those programs. So we basically see maybe 6 to 8 companies come in that are eventually graduated from the program and are eligible for the Interactive Digital Media Fund. So if you are top talent, you are coming out and you have a great idea, you do have an opportunity here, but it also is an opportunity for you to get some feedback on your idea, go through a selection process, and maybe your great idea isn't the great idea that you thought it was. Impossible. And maybe, yeah. But that's the hardest thing because, even you brought this up, top talent, great idea. How do you know? So this gives you an opportunity to get a little bit of sort of feedback and insight. And the participants in the program, when they complete it and are finished, are in a much better position. It's basically a mini incubator. So you're incubating your idea, and at the end of the program, you will have all of the tools that you need to come in, potentially with an application or to go out and pitch a publisher. And not everybody that comes in to the program actually ends up moving forward with their projects. Sometimes one of the things that happens, and you probably know this too, having done some prototyping and testing of ideas, sometimes you go through the process and you're like, that's no good, on to the next thing. So that happens as well sometimes.
Deary Don in the chat is asking, I'm gonna deviate the question a little bit. Okay. They're saying, do you have any applicants or grant recipients that are graduates from OCAD? But I'm more curious if there are, like you mentioned, partnerships with Hand-Eye and other groups. Are there specific relationships that you guys have with any of the universities or programs that where these people are drawn into the incubators?
So we don't work directly with students or recent graduates. Again, that sort of falls within the trade associations and the groups that we have that run the Futures program. But I am closely connected with a lot of educational institutions. I have contacts at OCAD, and we often will touch base and compare notes and make them. I think most of the educational institutions are aware of our program and or aware of the program that I was talking. I should probably give you the name because I don't think I did. It's the Futures Fund. Right. And then sometimes I will go in and I will speak at if certain sort of instructors, because I know lots of the instructors as well. They'll bring me in to speak to their students as well, and I do that all the time. I'm always really super happy to do that.
Right. Yeah, it's good education, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So let's look over. I mean, it's the program has been running for quite a while now. I mean, at least 6, 7 years, 8 years.
Oh God, way more than that.
Really?
Oh my gosh, I think
I'm just going off of how long I remember.
I want to say it's over 10 years, because I think I noted the 10-year, and I can't remember. I'm so bad with dates, but it's been a real heck of a long time. It's been more than 10 years for sure. I think we're probably around year 12. Ish.
Yeah. What are some of, I know you can't play favorites or specifics, but I mean, what are some of the great highlights in terms of releases and games and stuff that the program has participated in? What has been some of the great benefits that Ontario has seen?
Well, we've had the opportunity to fund so many fantastic developers. You're right; it is tough to choose favorites. One of the studios that we were involved with very early on in their life cycle, actually many of the major studios, indie studios, but Cappy was probably one of the first companies to come into the program and to basically use that as kind of a launch pad to kind of catapult themselves. And we had the opportunity to be involved to fund Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery, which was a real ride, and a really, really interesting project to kind of support and fund. Other studios that we've supported early on, Drinkbox. Yep. We were very sort of engaged and involved and I think almost all of their releases, and that was sort of a privilege and an honor. We've also seen companies that we've supported that are no longer operating. That happens as well. It is a tough and challenging business. I really enjoyed working with Bloom Digital Media on their project. Oh goodness, I'm blanking on the name. Oh my gosh, my old age is what's the, oh my gosh, not Later Daters, because that's their most recent release. It's also an awesome game. Oh my gosh, the high school one. Shoot, what's it called? Justin, save me.
I don't know.
Oh my gosh, hold on. I'm gonna pull it up because I want to see that. Sorry, my cat knocked my phone down, so I had to pick it up. But that was a really, really interesting project to be involved with, and to see their success is just, it's lovely and wonderful. I mean, that's the best part of my job, is watching companies succeed when they release their projects. It's just so incredibly lovely to be able to do that. I'm trying to pull up oh my gosh, how can I not remember this?
A lot of games.
No, it's actually not the game, it's my brain. No, I was gonna say Later Daters a game. No, it's 100% my game, my brain, not that. I'm old now. I mean, gosh, I'm closer to 50 than I am to 40.
Happens.
Yeah, it does for sure. There's been a lot of really rewarding projects that I've been able to kind of be engaged and involved with. I say, watching, a young company that is getting some accolades now and some traction and some recognition, Cocoa Cucumber with their upcoming project. You're going to remember that one, right? What's that one called? Shoot, Coco? The one that was just launched. Yeah. Damn, why can I not remember? River Bomb, but what's the new one that they just had launched?
Well, it's not out yet, so I'm free.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, but it was launched at the
Xbox event.
Xbox thing. Yeah.
Echo Generation.
Echo Generation. Yes. Yeah. So we are supporting that project as well. So it's great to see these kind of things do well. Cat again. And the other game, just because they're so awesome, and I forgot the name, is Long Story. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Another great one that I really loved being able to sort of be involved with. But I mean, when I see those little wins, it's like I get super excited. I feel like I'm winning too. It's so great. So I love it. It's been really awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
It's actually it's funny that you mentioned Cappy as a big win. Zed Craze is a big. Zed Craze has been. I know he's in the chat. He's just saying Echo Generation looks great, and I know he means it because I've seen him watch the trailer on his stream. It's funny that you mentioned Cappy specifically because they eventually grew to a point where they began the co-contributing to the indie fund and going on to fund their own games or on to fund other people's games.
Yeah. And that's a win. Like, that's the biggest thing. I'd say ultimately down the road, what we want is for people to eventually graduate from the Interactive Digital Media Fund and to be fully sustainable projects, companies. That's ultimately what we want. Sometimes it takes a long time to kind of get there, but it's exciting when we do. And I have loved working with that whole team through. They've always been such a pleasure to deal with.
Right on. What got you into this line of work?
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's a great question. So games were a new thing to kind of the agency when I started. So the beginning, I did a degree many years ago at York University. It was fantastic. And then my last year at York University, because I was a mass communications major with sociology minor or something like that. And my last year, I took two programs that I just absolutely loved. One was a television production program, and we actually worked in studio and made our own like show. It was great. And then I did this other really cool program. And I think it was back in the time when it wasn't even interactive content or interactive digital media. It was multimedia. I don't know if anybody on the stream knows that. I'm really showing my age. I am really close to 50. So it was a multimedia program, and we got to work in this really cool program called HyperCard. And we would make these things called stacks that were kind of these mini like standalone websites. And I loved that. I was at the lab at York University until the wee hours, like toiling away on my stack. It was magic to me. So when I finished York, I realized that I spent a great amount of my time getting a general arts degree and didn't have the skills to actually go and find a job. So I went back to school and I went to Ryerson. And at that time, there weren't any sort of graduate level programs in interactive or games, or like it was so nascent and so new. So I decided to pursue another degree at Ryerson, and I went into radio and television arts. And it was a bit of a misstep because while I loved the TV side of things, my heart was just captured by this interactive content stuff. I thought this is the greatest thing ever. So I finished my degree, went to work, did a few TV things, and then stumbled across the job at Ontario Creates, and I went in as an intern. And I've been there for over 20 years now, and started as an intern and sort of worked my way up. And at the time I started, that was when Ontario Creates was really just looking at getting involved in interactive, supporting the interactive industry. And at that point in time, it was very amorphous. We didn't know what the industry was, and it's very different than it is now. Now it's kind of established, and we kind of have core sort of, I guess, disciplines within interactive. So I was there from the ground up, and one day, once upon a time, I got a call from someone by the name of Warren Corral, who is a Toronto-based video game agent. And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you know about this thing called the gaming industry?" And I'm like, "No, what's the gaming industry?" And this is when I was in a very junior position at the agency, like low confidence, very shy, and still very shy, but whatever. But so Warren's like, "I want you to come out and I want you to present to the industry." And so I got my little PowerPoint together, got together with my colleague from the tax credit side. We prepared this lovely, wonderful presentation. We went to go and give the presentation at a law office. I think it was Goodman's was the law office. And we went in there, and it was the entire sort of gaming industry, all kinds of people. There were maybe like 100, 200 people in the audience. We stood up and gave our presentation and got roasted. They hated the programs. They hated us because, of course, they didn't really reflect what the games industry is and was. We've come a long way. So they were very generic. And because we were trying to appeal to so many different people with our funds. So we still have that sort of genericism in our like guidelines in our program, because we are dealing with web series producers, e-learning producers, video game developers. But our knowledge and our insight into the way the industry operates is so much better. It's like, I talk about learning. I mean, I learn every day. Boy, did I learn a lot after that. And that presentation is probably still online somewhere. And you will see me as a tiny little person, very, very small. And my colleagues to this day still laugh at me because I stood there. And every time someone would throw me a crappy, horrible, nasty question, I would answer it to the best of my ability. And then I would stand there and I would say, are there any more questions? Basically kick me in the teeth again. So it was a really big learning opportunity for us as an agency and me personally. And I think we've kind of come a long way. And now we have a fantastic set of programs and an amazing relationship with the gaming industry. So that's kind of how I stumbled into this. I love it. I love my job. It's the best job ever. I get to work with all the developers in the province. And I get to play games, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned those early days about the agency not necessarily knowing so much about the games industry, because I mean, I've seen through my way back 5 years ago, so when I was first started becoming aware of it, I saw a lot of IDM stuff sort of geared towards like web series or pay or interactive web things, and it was really like I was like very confused at the time, because it didn't seem like I was very aware that these are not like hugely successful things compared to like what I was seeing in games at the time. Was it a hard transition to sell the agency on like going whole hog into games and supporting games, or was it just something that made sense?
Not at all. I mean, I think that the industry sells itself because there's been so much growth in the gaming industry. And we see that, and we want to facilitate that and act as a catalyst for more growth. That's ultimately what we want to do. So it makes it's a good fit. It's not a tough sell. Hold on one sec. My cat knocked my power cord out. Oh my gosh, cats! I tell you. I will say that there's probably not a whole heck of a lot of gamers in the agency. But they respect the industry and respect the fact that it is growing and that there's a massive audience for games and that lots of people play games. I'm a gamer myself. I play, not as much as I'd like to, but I do play. I need to stop playing Animal Crossing and get onto something else, though.
Still on it.
With that game, I don't want to tell you how many times I've leveled my island and rebuilt it. It's disgusting.
I opened mine like a couple of weeks ago, and it was just like really depressing because I hadn't been there in a long time, and everybody was sad. And I'm like, I can't. I gotta bail.
It's my first thing every morning. I turn on my Switch and I play 20 minutes. Drives my husband crazy.
I'm very aware of sort of the cultural difference, I guess I can use the term, between for lack of a better term, suits who aren't familiar with games, who don't play a lot of games, who aren't breathing it day in and day out, and then the crazy people like me who are literally this is all we do, and I never stop for a second playing or thinking or working on games. I find communication between these two groups can be very, very difficult at times. Is there anything, as somebody who has been a for lack of a better term, a mediator between these two parties, you have a lot of experience in both worlds. What can you recommend to either side in terms of like making each other understand each other a little bit more, or making those communications a little easier?
One of the things that I find really interesting about people who don't play games is I don't think they really realize what a game is. Okay. So one of the things that I like to do, I mean, I say this having had firsthand experience with it. My many years ago, when I started playing Last of Us. Okay, I haven't played Last of Us 2, so no spoilers. I know I don't know why I haven't started. But my mother was down, and my mother knows nothing about video games. And I turned it on and I started playing, and my mother was just I don't know if she was in the room. I don't know why she was here while I was playing Last of Us, but she's like, "Oh my God, that's like a movie." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what games are. That's games." And I don't think that most people fully kind of understand that. They don't get it. So I think one of the easiest things to do is to get people to sit down with a game that you really like, that if you want to talk to somebody who doesn't get it, have them play something that you love, that you feel like they might appreciate as well. Because I think when people see that and get that, they understand what the industry is all about. On the other side, I mean, I think that's the best thing to do, honestly. Like, you're right. Both sides are different, So somebody who doesn't play games, the suits, and people who sort of play games and work in games, it's a different language. The other thing you do is like work with people who can speak both of those languages. That's why I love my job so much, and why I think I'm good at my job is because I can dialogue with both sides. And I do see myself, and my role is being a translator. Like I get to translate what the industry is saying to the people that don't understand it. But likewise, I get to translate from the people who are in the position of making these decisions to the people who are in the industry and maybe don't understand things about why we do things. Like even answering some of the questions that you brought up today and sort of giving some insight into what that means and how we make decisions and how we operate. It's helpful. I think it's good. It's dialogue is the most important thing for sure. And I like being that translator. I love it.
Well, you do a very good job.
Thank you.
I mean, you've been a wonderful guest here on the past hour. Is there anything that we can leave people with who are, I presume, in Ontario or wanting to seek funding in Ontario Creates, or any advice you'd like to give in general for people planning their projects or their pitch documents that you can leave them with today?
First step, read the guidelines. Second step, reach out and take a call. Like call us, because that's what we are here for. The other thing to flag, just that is actually kind of interesting, is every once in a while, I'd say every sort of 5 to 6 years, we do a review of our program, and we are just on the tail end of having done a review of the Interactive Digital Media Fund. So next fiscal year, we'll be sort of making a few adjustments and changes to the program before we launch it next fiscal year. So there will be some adjustments. There's nothing that is a bad adjustment. I think they're all really like good, positive changes. We listen to industry. So that's another thing to be aware of, is that we do listen to what the industry has to say, and we do make improvements to the program as we can within the constraints that we have to operate.
Right on. Well, I want to thank you one more time for coming on the show and sitting with us and answering all our questions.
It was so much fun.
It was a great time. It was a really good time, and it was good to catch up again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been ages.
Yeah, too long. Okay, everybody. I'm gonna send you out on a raid right now. Looks like somebody is just finishing up a game of Karen, so we'll be able to go and crash that. I'll also see you guys tomorrow. We're going to be working on more Sometimes Always Monsters updates. Yeah, I'll catch you guys. Thank you again, Kim. We're going to throw it on thanks for watching, and then I'll see you guys later. Ciao.